The year was 1865, and the frontier was a land of both opportunity and death. The kind of place where men carved kingdoms from dirt and blood, and women, well, women learned quick what dreams to let die. Annabelle Cross stepped off the stagecoach with hope clutched tight to her chest and mud clinging to her hem. The wind bit cruelly, whipping dust in her face, but she held her head high. She had traveled nearly 1,000 miles for this new beginning, for a man who'd promised to be her husband. She wore her best calico dress, the one with the faded blue flowers and a mended seam at the waist. Her bonnet sat low over her brows, shading her eyes from the sun and the stares of the townsfolk. Dry Gulch, Wyoming, wasn't much to look at. Just a scatter of crooked buildings, a church steeple leaning like a drunkard, and a saloon that bled smoke and laughter out its batwing doors. A man leaned against a post near the sheriff's office, chewing tobacco and watching her like she was a riddle written in the wrong language. Another spat in the dust and said something too low to catch. Annabelle ignored them. Her fingers curled tighter around the letter in her reticule, the one from Harlan Graves, written in thick, slanted handwriting with words like promise and devotion and soon-to-be Mrs. Graves. He'd written about his ranch outside town, about how lonely the winters were, about needing a woman strong enough to handle frontier life. He hadn't mentioned wanting one thin enough to suit the saloon girls. She walked through the town with purpose, her boots tapping on the rough wood boards, heart pounding. Folks turned to stare. A girl near the trading post whispered to her friend. Two men laughed outright. Mail-order bride, someone muttered. Poor bastard, don't know what's coming. She found Harlan in the saloon. He stood tall, broad shoulders, brown coat worn soft at the seams. He looked younger than she'd expected, with a trimmed beard and eyes like river stone. He glanced her way as she entered, eyes narrowing. A beat passed. Then he snorted. No, he said, turning back to his drink. Annabelle paused just inside the door. The room quieted like a breath held too long. Cigarette smoke curled through the beams overhead. A card game stalled mid-hand. Even the piano went silent. I beg your pardon, she said, voice clear but trembling. Harlan didn't turn. I said no. Whatever woman I ordered from back east, it wasn't you. I'm Annabelle Cross. We corresponded. You wrote to the agency in Boston. I didn't ask for a fat woman. The words fell like cold iron. Laughter followed, sharp and cruel. Someone in the back let out a whistle. Annabelle's face burned, but she did not flinch. She walked to his table, the sound of her boots a challenge. I made this journey on your word. I am not some parcel you can return. You are if you were falsely advertised. I wasn't. Don't matter, he said, finally turning to face her. I'm not going to marry a woman who will break the damn horse just climbing on it. A chorus of guffaws erupted. A man at the bar laughed so hard he spilled his drink. Even the bartender, an old crow of a man, smirked around his toothpick. Annabelle stood still, every part of her begging to run, but she stayed. I may not be the kind of pretty you were expecting, she said, voice low, but I got strength, heart, a willingness to build something with you. I need a wife, he said, rising from his chair, towering over her, not a burden. And with that, he reached out and flicked the brim of her bonnet, knocking it sideways. The crowd howled. Someone shouted, "She gonna cry?" But she didn't. Not there. Not yet. She turned and walked out, back straight, eyes forward. The laughter followed her all the way down the boardwalk. A boy tossed a rotten apple that bounced off her skirt. She didn't look back. Behind the mercantile, hidden from view, she collapsed beside a barrel and shook with silent fury. Her hands dug into the hard-packed earth. Her chest hurt, not from running, not from walking, but from something deeper, something breaking. By dusk, the boarding house matron had offered her a room for the night. Annabelle sat by the window, staring at the mountains in the distance. Pink and gold bathed the sky. She remembered her father's voice in the back of her mind. You ain't made for small men, Annie. You're too much sky for cages. That night, she didn't sleep. She packed her things and slipped away just before dawn. She left no note. She owed them nothing. The wagon she bought with the last of her money was old, the wheels groaning with every mile. The mule was stubborn, but she was leaving Dry Gulch behind, its cruelty, its shame. She told herself she didn't care where she went. She just needed a way, west, toward something that didn't look at her and see failure. By the third day, she was lost. The trail had faded behind her. The land grew wild and quiet, the air cooler. Her maps were useless. The river she'd followed split unexpectedly. Clouds piled overhead. A storm growled on the horizon. It came down like vengeance. Rain lashed her wagon. Thunder cracked, so loud it stole her breath. The mule bucked and ran, yanking free of the reins. She screamed, chasing it a few paces before tripping in the mud. The wagon tipped, supplies spilling into the dark. One wheel cracked. Her bags sank into the muck. Lightning flashed. Trees bent. The world became shadow and fury. She stumbled through the woods, soaked and sobbing, branches whipping her face. Her feet bled inside her boots. She found no shelter, only more darkness. Wolves howled in the distance. Her pulse surged. She spun in circles, disoriented. Then silence. Too still, too quiet. She backed against a tree, heart hammering. The storm had passed, but the cold cut through her like knives. Her breath clouded in the air. She collapsed, shivering, lips blue. Her fingers, once nimble with needle and thread, curled useless in her lap. "I'll die out here," she whispered, "and no one will know." The thought didn't scare her. Not really. She had died a little already, back in Dry Gulch. The rest was just formality. A crunch of boots on wet leaves startled her. She opened her eyes to see a shadow move between the trees. A tall figure stepped forward, rifle aimed low but steady. He wore a broad-brimmed hat and a coat heavy with rain. His face was half hidden in the gloom. He spoke with a voice like gravel scraped over stone. "You lost, miss." She tried to speak, but couldn't. Her throat was raw. Her limbs refused to move. He knelt beside her, setting the rifle against a stump. "Damn fool," he muttered, pulling off his coat and wrapping it around her shoulders. "This ain't no place for crying women." She wanted to slap him, or thank him, or both. Instead, she passed out. When she woke, it was morning. Birds sang above her. She lay on a bed of pine needles near a campfire that smoked gently. Her dress was dry, mostly. The coat still wrapped her like a cocoon. She turned her head and saw him a few feet away, tending a snare line. He was big, with shoulders like carved stone and hands rough as old leather. His hair was dark, braided in the back. His face was sun-worn, lined, one cheek marked with a thin white scar. His expression was unreadable. "You're awake," he said without looking over. "Good. Where am I?" "Alive." She coughed, tried to sit up. Pain shot through her ribs. "I found you half froze to death. Thought about leaving you. Why didn't you?" He looked at her then, eyes the color of tarnished silver. "Didn't feel right." She swallowed. "Thank you." He nodded, turning back to his snares. "What's your name?" she asked. "Silas." Silence stretched between them. Finally, he said, "You ain't from here." "No." "Where you headed?" "I don't know anymore." That made him look at her again. Something flickered in his eyes, not pity, but curiosity, like a man studying a storm cloud to see if it meant rain or ruin. "You hungry?" She nodded. He handed her a strip of dried meat. She chewed slowly, tasting smoke and salt and survival. When she looked up again, he was watching her. Not with disdain, not with judgment, just watching. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel ashamed to be seen. She didn't ask if he'd take her back to town. She didn't want to go. He didn't ask why she was alone. He didn't need to. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the woods, a wolf howled, and a quiet voice inside her whispered, "You're not dead yet." The air smelled of pine, sap, and morning ash. Smoke curled slow and steady from the campfire, and dew clung to every leaf like pearls on green lace. Annabelle stirred beneath the thick wool coat that smelled faintly of leather, sweat, and something wilder. When she opened her eyes, she half expected to see nothing, for the woods to have swallowed that man whole like some wandering ghost of the frontier. But there he was, Silas Boone, crouched beside a fallen log, carving bark from a branch with a knife, so worn its hilt was patched with twine. "You sleep like a bear in spring," he said without looking up. Annabelle sat up slowly. Her muscles protested the movement, but she kept the winds from her face. And you talk like you ain't seen a soul in years. He gave a grunt at that. Not quite amusement, not quite annoyance. Where are we? About 10 miles west of Dry Gulch. Maybe more. You strayed far. I didn't mean to. Her fingers worked at the hem of her dress, twisting it in nervous knots. I was trying to get away. He looked at her then, the knife pausing in his hand. From what? She thought about lying. But what good would that do out here, in a world stripped bare of pretense? From a man who promised to marry me, she said, voice low, until he saw me. Silas's face didn't change. He returned to whittling. Then he's a fool. Annabelle blinked. She wasn't sure she'd heard him right. I don't need pity, she said stiffly. Didn't offer any. He sliced a curl from the branch. Just counting it how I see it. She didn't reply. What was there to say? She pulled the coat tighter around her, grateful for its warmth, grateful he hadn't left her to freeze in the woods. By noon, they were walking. Silas led the way through a deer trail so narrow the branches caught her sleeves. He moved with a quiet certainty, rifle slung over his shoulder, steps sure and silent. She stumbled more than once, but he never looked back to mock her. When she twisted her ankle on a root, he paused only long enough to ask, "You can walk?" And when she nodded, they kept going. They reached his homestead by late afternoon. It wasn't much, just a cabin tucked between two rock outcrops beside a stream. The roof sloped low, smoke rising from a crooked chimney. Chickens clucked in a rough pen, and a hound barked once before trotting out to greet them, tail wagging. "Home," Silas said. Annabelle hesitated. "You live here alone?" He opened the door and let her in. The interior was dim and smelled of wood smoke, bare grease, and cedar. A stove sat against one wall, iron pots hanging above it. There were shelves lined with jars, dried herbs strung from the rafters, and a single bed shoved into the corner beside a stack of pelts. "I live," he said. She stood in the doorway, uncertain. "You can stay in the loft," he added. "Ain't much room, but it's dry and warm." She nodded. "Thank you." He grunted again, then walked past her to hang his coat. That night, she lay on a pile of furs above the main room, the scent of smoke and pine filling her nose. Below, she heard Silas stoke the fire, shift a chair, and settle with a low sigh. She stared at the rafters, too tired to sleep, too wary to let her guard down completely. In the morning, she rose to the smell of biscuits and salt pork. Silas said nothing as she came down, only slid a plate toward her. "I didn't expect this," she said. "What?" "Kindness." He gave a quiet huff. "Ain't kindness. It's food." She ate in silence, but a smile tugged at her lips. The days passed like that, quiet, work-filled, strange in their simplicity. Silas kept to himself, speaking only when necessary, moving through his routines like a man with no need for company. But he didn't stop her from helping. She chopped wood, tended the chickens, even learned to set traps with hands that once only knew needle and thread. He watched her work without comment, but once she caught him nodding at her split logs like he approved. At night, he told her little things in pieces. About the land, about the animals. He never mentioned family, never said whether anyone might come looking for him. So she told him, one night as the wind howled outside. "My father raised me alone," she said. "He was a blacksmith. Strong hands, softer heart. Folks laughed when they saw how much I took after him." Silas looked at her across the flickering fire. "He used to tell me stories," she went on. "Said I was too much for the world. Too much fire, Annie girl. You'll burn the wrong man to cinders before you find one who don't mind the heat." Silas stared into the flames. Sounds like he knew something most don't. She smiled, though it ached. "He died last winter. Consumption took him quick." They sat in silence after that, the wind pressing against the cabin walls like an old enemy. One morning, he returned from the woods limping, a jagged tear across his thigh. "Cougar," he muttered. "Snuck close while I was dressing a hare." Annabelle rushed to his side, helping him inside. He hissed as she cleaned the wound, teeth clenched. "You ever think about not going out alone?" she scolded, hands steady despite her fear. "Don't got much choice." "You do now." His gaze met hers then, sharp as broken glass. "You think you'll last out here, do you? Just 'cause you made a few fires and swung an axe." I know what people think I am, she said, pressing cloth against the gash. But you're the first who didn't look at me like a mistake. That silenced him. She sewed the wound closed, hands sure, ignoring the sting of tears she didn't understand. He slept most of the next 2 days, feverish and half-aware. She kept the fire going, changed the bandages, hunted rabbits with trembling hands. She burned one stew and cried from sheer frustration, but kept going. When he finally stirred and saw her snoring beside his bedroll, arms folded across her chest, he didn't speak. He just watched her breathe. By the 5th day, he was back on his feet, slower but determined. She caught him staring at her once, really looking, and he didn't turn away fast enough. They sat by the creek that evening, the air sharp with the coming of snow. I used to think I'd end up married to a banker, she said, voice light. Can't see you bikini pies for garden socials. I can bake. I meant. She laughed. Okay, now what you meant. He smiled, the first real one she'd seen. It made him look younger, less haunted. You ever been married? She asked. His face closed up like a bear trap. Had a wife. Long time ago. She didn't ask more. The pain in his voice said plenty. The silence stretched. They killed her, he said finally. Raiders. Took my daughter too. Annabelle swallowed hard. I'm sorry. He nodded. Ain't looking for pity either. I wasn't offering. They sat like that until the light faded, both staring at the water. Back at the cabin, she knelt by the fire, rubbing her hands. He watched her from the chair. You ever think about staying? He asked suddenly. She looked up. I thought I already was. He gave a slow nod. Just don't want you thinking you owe me anything. I don't, she said, rising to her feet. But I want to be here. Their eyes locked. Something passed between them. Not heat, not yet, but the slow burn of trust rekindled. He stood, walked past her toward the stove, then paused. You're the strongest woman I've met. She blinked. Because I can split wood? Because you still hope. The next day, snow came heavy. They worked side by side, hauling in firewood, shoring the roof. When the wind howled like wolves, they shared whiskey and stories. She told him about Boston, about the parlor she'd worked in, about the dreams she'd buried. He told her about Missouri, about war, and about how he'd once wanted to build a town with his own 2 hands. That night, she touched his arm as she passed. Just a touch, and he didn't flinch. Later, in the quiet above the hearth, she lay awake, listening to him breathe below. For the first time in her life, Annabelle didn't feel like too much. She felt just right. And in the deep stillness of the woods, where snow blanketed sin and sorrow alike, she whispered to the dark, Let me have this. Silas stirred in his sleep, and outside, the wolves didn't howl. The storm had passed, and something new was rising. The thaw came sudden, like a drunk crashing through a church door, loud, wet, and full of mess. Snow gave way to mud, rivers rose, and birds sang too loud for folks still grieving winter. The forest was waking, and with it, so was Annabelle. She stood at the edge of the creek one morning, her reflection rippling in the cold water. Her dress hung looser now, arms strong from chopping and hauling, skin kissed raw by wind and sun. There was a steadiness in her she hadn't known before, like her bones had remembered something old. Behind her, Silas chopped wood with that same quiet resolve. The rhythm of his axe against pine had become the music of her new life. It comforted her, grounded her. But the peace cracked when Hiram Lockett rode in. He came from Dry Gulch, a trapper who passed through the mountains twice a season. Silas had traded with him before. Pelts for bullets, jerky for salt. This time, Hiram brought news. He swung off his horse, hat heavy with trail dust, and spat into the fire. Got a stirring in town, he said. Your name's been dragged, girl. Annabelle straightened. By who? Harlan Graves. Been talking like a rooster with a new hen house. Claims you tried to rob him. Says you ran off with Jules and 2 of his horses. Silas leaned back against a tree, arms folded. He ain't got no horses. Men can't ride nothing that don't walk itself. He's saying worse now, Hiram added. Said you cried, begged to stay with him. Said he turned you out 'cause you were a liar and a cheat. Annabelle's throat dried. And folks believe him? Hiram shrugged. Town's small. Truth's got to fight hard round liars. Silas's jaw flexed, that scar on his cheek pulled tight. I should go back, Annabelle said. Set the record straight. Silas didn't look at her. Don't matter what they think. It matters to me. Hiram raised an eyebrow. Town ain't kind, miss. You sure? Annabelle stared into the fire. I didn't walk through hell to be slandered by a coward. Silas said nothing. That night, as they sat in the cabin, she rolled the idea around her head like a stone in her mouth. You don't want me to go, she said. No. She nodded slowly. Why? He hesitated. Because I know what they'll do to you, and I know what I'll do if they try. She looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't afraid of blood. He was afraid of what it might turn him back into. I won't let them break me, she said. I know, he replied. That's what I'm afraid of. She smiled, soft and sad. You afraid of me getting hurt? I'm afraid of losing what I never thought I'd find again. Silas didn't sleep that night. Neither did she. At dawn, she packed a small satchel. Dressed in a skirt that no longer pinched, boots tied tight. Hair braided back. No ribbons. No flourishes. Just truth. Silas saddled 2 horses. They rode in silence. Dry Gulch hadn't changed much. Mud thickened the streets. The same crooked steeple. Same rusted bell, clanging like an offbeat warning. But this time, Annabelle didn't approach as a girl hoping for kindness. She came as a woman with her spine straight and storm in her eyes. They stopped outside the saloon. The sign swung in the breeze like a noose. I go in alone, she said. Silas didn't answer. I have to. He nodded, handed her a pistol. In case talk fails. Talk's never worked with men like Harland. She stepped inside. Silence felt like a guillotine. She walked across the floor, each boot step a challenge. Smoke hung thick. Cards lay forgotten. Men turned to watch. Harlan Graves sat at his usual table, drink in hand, smirk already forming. Well, look what the wind dragged in. She didn't blink. Harlan, come to apologize? That'd be a first. She didn't stop walking until she stood at his table. She met his gaze, steady and cold. You lied. I told the town what they needed to hear. No, you told them what made you feel big. He leaned back. Woman like you oughta know her place. I do. It's not under your boot. The bartender shifted nervously. Someone near the back muttered, oh. Harlan stood, too close. You think because you got some mountain man playing house with you, you're untouchable. I think, she said, you're a coward who mocks what he can't control. Harlan reached for her arm, and the door slammed open. Silas Boone walked in, rifle slung, but hand near the grip. The room shrank. Even the piano player dropped a key. Touch her, Silas said, and your hand won't touch anything ever again. Harlan froze. Silas stepped up beside her. She's my wife, he said loud enough for the walls to remember it. Murmurs rippled through the room. That true? The sheriff called from near the door. You two married? Silas didn't blink. War needs no paper. But you try making her out a thief again, and I'll show you what we sign in blood. The sheriff scratched his beard. Harlan, you want to press charges? Harlan glanced between the rifle and the fire in Annabelle's eyes. No. Then we're done here, the sheriff muttered. Harlan tried to laugh. She still ain't worth it. Annabelle stepped forward, voice ice. You couldn't carry the worth of a woman like me. Your back's too weak and your pride too loud. The saloon went quiet again. Then, slowly, someone clapped. It was Hiram, leaning against the doorframe. Others followed. Not many, but enough to turn silence into shame. Harlan sat down, red-faced and shrinking. Outside, the wind carried dust and memory alike. They walked from the saloon into the open light. On the edge of town, Silas turned to her. You're sure about leaving it all behind? She nodded. There was never anything here worth staying for. He took her hand, calloused and warm. What about me? She looked at him long, slow. You were never part of the dirt. You were part of the sky. They mounted up. Back on the trail, the mountains stood tall and waiting. They didn't talk much on the ride back, but they didn't need to. At the cabin, she stoked the fire while he chopped wood. Later, they sat close, not touching but tethered all the same. You think they'll come after us? She asked. If they do, Silas said, they'll find we're not as soft as they thought. She smiled. No, she said. We're not soft. Night came. Stars blinked like forgotten names above them. He reached for her hand again, and she didn't flinch. The world beyond their walls could lie, sneer, mock. But in the silence between two people who saw each other playing, there was truth. And it was enough.